spend time with Marco, but he's dressed up like Joe, so it's probably worth scaring.
Well, 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 I haven't seen a working kitchen in years. I think that was the only infected, so I've got time to make this for Ellie. This is something Sarah wanted to make right before the outbreak. She called them witch's fingers. I think they're more like clicker fingers. She was watching these on some YouTube channel. Some guy up in Canada, he would teach you how to make these things and he'd be like, "Hello, I'm Marco and welcome to my home kitchen. Today I want to show you how to make clicker fingers. You can also call them witch's fingers or wizard fingers, whatever your pronouns. These are pistachio sugar cookies that look like the fingers of the infected in The Last of Us. This recipe was originally inspired by the Kim Petras album, Turn Off the Lights, which has this amazing claw on the front. I tested so many variations on this recipe to figure out how to make them look this way with no food colors, how to make them taste good and have a good texture. I think these are perfect after so much testing. If you are going to make these, I really recommend you use a kitchen scale because they go from clicker fingers to bloaters in like the difference of 10 grams of butter. I'm gonna show you how to make these by hand in case you end up in the apocalypse or you don't have a food processor. And then I'm going to show you the easy way in the food processor. If you don't have a food processor or you're in the apocalypse, put your pistachios in a Ziploc bag. Grab a wooden rolling pin and smash the pistachios like your life depends on it. You're never gonna believe what makes these cookies green. It's just nuts. Once you get like a general smash, then you can go through and do your detailed smashing. That's about as smashed as this is going to get by hand. It is tedious, but it will train you in the tasks you will have to do after the outbreak. So set those aside. Now you're going to mix the butter and sugar. And here you just want to mix the butter and sugar. You don't want to cream it to get in a lot of air. You're just combining. Now add in 1 egg and 1 egg yolk. Getting this cookie to keep its shape in the oven is really critical to having the balance right. So these are US large eggs, which weigh 50 grams each. Mix this together. This sounds like sounds from the games. Then add a pinch of salt and 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract, which obviously you're going to be able to find after the world ends. Well, I guess technically the world didn't end, society collapsed. Add in your pistachios. And then last, your flour. This is an extremely dry dough. The texture you're going to look for is one of coarse sand. So if your spoon isn't cutting it, switch to your hands. Once it comes together, just knead it a couple of times until the color is uniform. Now the dough needs to rest for about half an hour so that it can hydrate. That's a really critical step I wouldn't skip here because it's going to give you much smoother finishes on the final cookies. So while this rests, I'm going to show you how to make the same dough in a food processor. I realize I've been making apocalypse jokes like there's no tomorrow. Too soon? Making this in a food processor is way easier. So first, add in your pistachios, your sugar, and a pinch of salt. Now you're gonna process this for 30 seconds. What's the downside to eating a clock? It's time consuming. Now you're just gonna add everything else. So in goes the flour. The butter cut up into cubes. 1 egg. 1 egg yolk. And 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. And process. And that's it. It's so much easier. The other thing you can do if you don't have a food processor is grind up the nuts in a blender, or if you have a hand blender with one of those like cup things, you can do it in there too. And now I'm just gonna move it into a bowl so it can rest for half an hour. Once this is in the bowl, you want to give it a light knead and then let it rest for 30 minutes as well. This needs to rest for half an hour, so that's enough time to upgrade your weapons, make some health kits, maybe some Molotov cocktails, whatever you need. Swap your bottles for rocks. What do you call a hand with extra fingers? I don't know, but you can count on it more than the others. Now to shape the cookies, you need a baking sheet that will fit in your freezer. So if you have a 1/4 sheet tray, that's perfect. It should also have parchment paper on it because they will adhere to the surface of the pan. So you really need the parchment paper here. To shape these, I like to rip off about a tablespoon sized portion. These don't need to be consistent because fingers are all different sizes. And then you need to squish the dough a little bit to soften the butter. It's gonna help it keep a smoother texture. And then roll it out on the counter. If it starts breaking, which it might, just squeeze it back together. I usually make them between 3 and 5 inches long. You can use one of your own fingers as a measuring stick. Everybody's fingers are different, so if you would like them to be long or short or fat or squat, the choice is yours. So make them vaguely finger shaped. Place them on your baking sheet, and then grab one of the almonds. This first step is a little bit difficult to explain, so you might just have to look at it visually. Take your almond and put the pointy side at the tip of your finger. Then you're gonna take your thumb and forefinger and hold it in front of the fingernail. At the same time, you're going to push the fingernail down and squeeze the front of the finger so that you get a point at the front and kind of this knuckle shape forming behind it. When you push down the almond, you still want there to be dough underneath, because you're going to put jam underneath the fingernail after these are all finished. Then looking at your own finger, you'll see you have these fold lines on the knuckles. So grab a paring knife or a butter knife and use the back side, the dull side of it, and press 3 times in a row to make that first knuckle. Follow down to make your next knuckle, and then 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I like to make the fingers a little disfigured because lots of stuff happens after the outbreak, and the infected are getting doors slammed on them, they're getting shotguns blasted, they are getting flooded, they don't have an easy life, and their fingers might end up warped. Now you're going to repeat this for however many fingers that you get. Sometimes I overestimate how much dough I need, so just break some off. You don't need to worry about spacing at this point. They can all be touching here because they're going straight into the freezer, and you're going to move them onto a different baking sheet later. I also like to make them different lengths so that when you present them, they all look like a hand. These will expand a tiny amount in the oven, but they shouldn't expand too much. So basically what you see here is what you're going to get. So any final adjustments you want to make them look more spooky, now's your opportunity. If you're not a fan of The Last of Us, but you are a fan of Hocus Pocus, you could also call this Witch's Fingers and a Dead Man's Toe. I've got 10 fingers, no toes. On the other hand, I can count. So these are going into the freezer for 20 minutes until they are fully firm, and then they're gonna go into the oven. While we're waiting, I did find Ellie's book of jokes. It doesn't matter how much you push the envelope, it's still stationary. Bakers trade recipes on a need-to-know basis. A moon rock tastes better than an earthly rock because it's meatier. Do you want to hear a joke about pizza? Never mind, it's too cheesy. After 20 minutes in the freezer, these should be hard as a rock and easy to lift up off the baking sheet. You want to go from frozen to oven because that is going to help them retain the shape. The outside of the cookie should set before the butter starts melting too much, so you'll get minimal spreading. If the ratios are off in the cookie, they can spread to like 3 times their size. So if this is the first batch that you're putting in the oven, make sure you give them quite a bit of space. On the baking sheet, place them 2 inches apart. It looks so spooky on the ceramic baking sheet. Oh, I have a joke for that. I broke 1 finger today, but on the other hand, I'm okay. You want your oven at 325. It's a little lower than normal because you don't want to get a lot of color on the outside. These are gonna bake for about 12 minutes and we'll see what they look like. I hope they stay this shape. A boiled egg in the morning is really hard to beat. When the power went out, the school children were delighted. A friend of mine cut off his finger at work and he didn't even get severance pay. This is what they should look like when they come out. They look perfect. They are so spooky looking. You can hear the infected coming for you. But there's one more trick to turn these into the spookiest treat, and it's adding in some jam. I'm using boysenberry jam. This one's just delicious and I had it. But raspberry jam, strawberry jam, blackcurrant, any of those would be perfect. And you need to do this while the cookies are hot. So take the almonds out and set them beside the fingers so that you remember which nail goes with which cookie. Then with your tiny, tiny measuring spoon, put somewhere between 1/8 and 1/16 of a teaspoon of jam into the nail bed. You want the jam to be closer to the cuticle than to the tip of the fingernail. Once you have that in, place your almonds back in. I really like adding the jam because it's another flavor component that's really bright and fun. It glues the nails down so they're not gonna fall off, especially if you're transporting these anywhere. And it totally ups the creepy factor. These need to cool fully before you move them. If you try to move them while they're warm, you're going to break your fingers. Move these to your spookiest plate. I kind of like arranging them a bit like a hand. There's the other half of that one. So, how do they taste? They're really good. They have that toasted pistachio flavor, but the buttery sweetness of a typical sugar cookie. The texture is closer to a shortbread, so they kind of melt in your mouth in that kind of crumbly, sandy way. And these are just such a great cookie. I really hope you make these. I hope you have a lot of fun with them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like more seasonal recipes, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.
Marco in the dark zone. He looks like Joe, so I'm pretty scared. I hope it's not the last of Marco.
What was that?